Alcatraz Escape. On the night of June 11, 1962, three men attempted the escape that would turn Alcatraz from a prison into a legend. Frank Morris and brothers, John and Clarence Anglin, were locked inside one of the most famous federal prisons in America, a fortress surrounded by the cold waters of San Francisco Bay. Alcatraz was not just supposed to hold prisoners. It was supposed to crush the idea of escape itself. But for months, the men worked quietly behind their cells. They widened ventilation openings, created fake wall covers, and built dummy heads from materials like soap, concrete dust, and paint so guards would think they were asleep. They also made a raft and life preservers from prison raincoats. When the night finally came, they placed the fake heads in their beds, crawled through the openings, moved through utility spaces, reached the roof, climbed down, crossed the prison grounds, and launched into the bay. The escape was not discovered until the next morning. By then, Morris and the Anglin brothers were gone. The official FBI conclusion was that they likely drowned in the cold, rough water, but no bodies were ever found. That missing ending is what made the escape immortal. Unlike many prison breaks, this one did not end with handcuffs, a shootout, or a clear death scene. It ended with silence. The men escaped the prison, but whether they escaped the bay remains one of the most famous mysteries in American criminal history. John Dillinger's wooden gun escape. John Dillinger did not need explosives, tunnels, or a team of armed men to escape from Crown Point Jail in Indiana. On March 3, 1934, he used something far more embarrassing to the authorities, a fake gun. Dillinger was already one of the most notorious bank robbers in America, and officials had placed him in a jail they described as escape-proof. That confidence became part of the humiliation. According to the FBI, Dillinger claimed later that the gun he used was wooden, carved, and darkened to look real. Whether every detail of the wooden gun story has been debated over the years, the result was undeniable. Dillinger intimidated guards, forced his way out of his cell, locked up guards and trustees, grabbed real weapons, and fled. The escape turned him into something larger than a criminal. He became a national embarrassment to law enforcement. The idea that one of America's most wanted men had walked out of an escape-proof jail with a fake weapon was almost unbelievable. But Dillinger's freedom did not last long. After months of pursuit, federal agents tracked him to Chicago. On July 22, 1934, he was shot and killed outside the Biograph Theater. His escape succeeded, but it also intensified the manhunt that ended his life. The Texas Seven. The Texas Seven escape was not mysterious or elegant. It was organized, violent, and followed by one of the most intense manhunts in modern American history. On December 13, 2000, 7 inmates broke out of the John B. Connolly unit near Kennedy, Texas. Their plan was carefully staged. They overpowered prison employees and officers, took uniforms, stole weapons, and used a prison vehicle to get away. Once outside, they did not simply disappear into hiding. They committed robberies, moved across states, and became the subject of a nationwide search. The escape became even darker on December 24, 2000, when Irving police officer Aubrey Hawkins was killed while responding to a robbery at a sporting goods store. That murder changed the case from a prison escape into a national tragedy. The fugitives were eventually traced to Colorado after media attention and tips helped narrow the search. One of the escapees, Larry Harper, died by suicide as police closed in. The remaining 6 were captured and later convicted in connection with Officer Hawkins' murder. The Texas Seven did escape prison, but they did not escape justice. Their breakout became infamous because of the planning, the violence afterward, and the death of an officer who crossed their path. Dannemora prison escape. In June 2015, 2 convicted murderers walked out of Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora, New York, in a way that sounded more like a movie than a real prison break. Richard Matt and David Sweat did not rush a gate or overpower a tower guard. They cut through walls, moved through hidden areas inside the prison, and eventually escaped through a steam pipe system. Their cells were left with makeshift decoys to delay discovery. By the time officers realized they were gone during an early morning bed check, the 2 men had vanished into the surrounding region. The escape triggered a massive manhunt across northern New York. Roads were searched. Woods were combed. Residents locked their doors. The investigation also revealed help from prison employees, including Joyce Mitchell, who was later convicted for her role. But the escape began to collapse as the days passed. Richard Matt was shot and killed by authorities after nearly 3 weeks on the run. David Sweat was captured 2 days later after being shot and wounded near the Canadian border. Unlike Alcatraz, this escape had a clear ending. They got out of the prison, but they could not outrun the search that followed. Assata Shakur's escape. On November 2, 1979, Assata Shakur, also known as Joanne Chesimard, escaped from the Clinton Correctional Facility for Women in New Jersey. She had been convicted in the killing of New Jersey State Trooper Werner Forster during a 1973 shootout, a case that remained politically charged for decades. Her escape was not a tunnel job or a solo breakout. It was a coordinated armed operation. According to accounts of the case, visitors connected to militant groups entered the prison, drew weapons, took correction officers hostage, and helped Shakur leave in a prison van. No one was injured during the escape itself. What made this escape different from most American prison breaks is that Shakur was never recaptured. She eventually reached Cuba, where she was granted political asylum. For supporters, she became a symbol of political resistance. For law enforcement, she remained a convicted murderer and fugitive. In 2013, the FBI placed her on its most wanted terrorists list under the name Joanne Chesimard. Her escape became infamous because it did not end with a capture, a surrender, or a prison return. It became an international case that lasted for decades. The Mecklenburg death row escape. On May 31, 1984, 6 death row inmates escaped from Mecklenburg Correctional Center in Virginia, creating what has often been described as the largest death row escape in U.S. history. This was not a desperate dash over a fence. It was a calculated takeover from inside the unit. The prisoners studied guard routines, waited for security mistakes, and used homemade weapons to seize control. They overpowered officers, took uniforms, and moved through the prison by pretending to be part of the staff. The escape was terrifying not only because 6 inmates fled, but because they were all awaiting execution. Their freedom lasted only a short time. Some were caught within days. Others made it farther. Linwood and James Briley, 2 of the most feared escapees, were the last to be captured. They were found on June 19, 1984, after authorities traced a phone call. All 6 were returned to custody. The escape became infamous because it exposed how routine complacency and small security failures could open the door even on death row. They escaped the building, but not the system waiting outside it. Glen Stewart Godwin. Glen Stewart Godwin's escape from Folsom State Prison in California in 1987 was the kind of breakout that depended on planning, outside help, and nerve. Godwin was serving time for murder when he escaped from one of America's most famous prisons. According to the FBI, he cut through fencing and used a storm drain to get out. He then escaped using a route that led toward the American River, where help was believed to have been waiting. Unlike many escapees, Godwin did not get caught quickly in the woods or a nearby town. He made it out of the country. Later in 1987, he was arrested in Mexico on drug trafficking charges. But even that did not end the story. After being sent to a prison in Guadalajara, he allegedly killed another inmate in 1991 and escaped again before he could be returned to U.S. authorities. Godwin became one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives in 1996. His case is infamous because he did not just escape once and get dragged back. He escaped, fled internationally, was imprisoned again, and escaped again. It was the kind of case that made him seem less like a fugitive and more like a permanent failure in the machinery meant to hold him. Ted Bundy's escapes. Ted Bundy's escapes were infamous not because they were technically brilliant, but because of what happened after them. In 1977, while facing murder charges in Colorado, Bundy was allowed to act as his own attorney. During a courthouse visit in Aspen on June 7, he jumped from a second-floor law library window and ran. For several days, he survived in the mountains before being recaptured. That first escape was embarrassing, but it was not the one that made history darker. On December 30, 1977, Bundy escaped again, this time from jail in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. He had lost weight, cut through a small opening in the ceiling of his cell, moved through the crawl space, and slipped out. This time, he was not caught in a few days. He made his way to Florida, where he committed more attacks before finally being arrested in 1978. Bundy's escapes are remembered with horror because they were not just escapes from custody. They gave a serial killer more time outside, and that time had deadly consequences. He was eventually convicted in Florida and executed in 1989. Willie Sutton and Eastern State Penitentiary. Willie Sutton was one of America's most famous bank robbers, and his reputation was built partly on his ability to escape. One of his most famous breakouts happened at Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia in 1945. Unlike Dillinger's bluff or Bundy's crawlspace escape, this was a tunnel escape. Sutton and other inmates spent time digging a passage beneath the prison, turning patience into a weapon. On April 3, 1945, 12 prisoners escaped through the tunnel and emerged outside the walls, but the freedom was almost immediately disappointing for Sutton. He was captured the same day. That is what makes the escape memorable in a different way. The plan was bold. The tunnel was real. The prison walls were defeated. But the outside world was not as easy to control as the inside plan. Sutton later escaped from custody again in his criminal career, but the Eastern State Tunnel escape became part of his legend, because it showed both his daring and the limits of even a successful prison break. Getting out was only half the problem. Staying out was the part that destroyed most escapees. Libby prison escape. One of the most dramatic American prison escapes happened during the Civil War, long before modern surveillance, helicopters, and nationwide police alerts. In February 1864, Union officers imprisoned at Libby Prison in Richmond, Virginia, carried out a massive tunnel escape. Libby Prison was a Confederate facility, and the prisoners inside faced harsh conditions and the uncertainty of war. Instead of waiting, a group of officers began digging from the prison cellar, working secretly over time to create a tunnel leading beyond the walls. When the escape happened, 109 prisoners made it out. Not all of them reached safety. Some were recaptured, but many successfully made their way back to Union lines. The scale of the escape made it extraordinary. This was not one man slipping through a window or a small group cutting a fence. It was a large, organized wartime breakout carried out under dangerous conditions. The Libby prison escape became infamous because it showed how discipline and patience could turn captivity into opportunity. In the middle of a war, these prisoners did not simply escape a building. Many escaped back into the conflict itself. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.